Ready?
Give me just a second.
Oh, okay. I missed it first.
There we go. You're on.
Okay. Welcome back, everybody. We're having more meetings in April, and I think we've had all in the last 6 months, but it's all worth it. We are at Thursday's special town council meeting, which was a work session originally for our Robert's Rules of Order. So welcome everybody who's watching, and everyone on council is present and accounted for. So if we could start by saying the Pledge of Allegiance and then the invocation for those who would like to share prayer. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Wood, do you have prayer?
Yes, ma'am. If you'll pray with me, I'd be grateful. Gracious God, we pray you comfort those under great duress who desperately need your favor. We pray for our eyes to be open to see the strangers in our community as neighbors and open our hearts to help all in need. Guide the people of our town to show compassion, justice, and peace, and may we honor one another to serve the common good. We request your continued blessings for our beloved town, and may the donations from those who generously give hope to our neighbors. In God's holy name, amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Dan. Following invocation, we have public comment. Public comment while we're doing this type of council meeting is requested to be sent online. Kim Chapman, our town clerk, will gather them online and she will read them, and she reads very quickly, but she will be cut off at the 3-minute rule, which is standard. And she will start as soon as we get the timer up. Any public comments?
Okay, we have 8 public comments.
Okay.
And they're all in regard to the proposed mask resolution. First comment is from Jay Rocha of Grovewood Road in Bluffton. I went to Sam's Club on Tuesday. While the store is counting incoming customers, it was chaos in the store. More than half of the customers were not wearing masks and not being aware of other space. The employees did not seem to care, and there was no way arrows in the aisles. I was under the impression there were rules for stores. That's the end.
Okay.
Next one, Angela Smith, 897 Fording Island Road, Bluffton. At this point, people's civil rights are being violated. The duration and severity of the restrictions in place are unconstitutional and based on conflicting, false, and/or exaggerated numbers and data. The pools and playgrounds should open immediately. Kids are playing outside together all the time anyway, and people are becoming increasingly restless the longer this drags out. Being confined to homes and restricted indefinitely is not living. We have the constitutional rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The fearful and medically fragile can continue to stay inside at their choice, but the rest of us should be able to legally start living again. Many are finding ways to do so anyway. The next one is Justin Jarrett, 4 Ashbourne Court. I applaud council for being proactive on this issue and attempting to reach a resolution that gives our local businesses a fighting chance to get through this without endangering the public health. I think it's important to remember that we can never know if we were too cautious, while the cost of failing to take the appropriate precautions would be devastating. Wearing a mask while in public is the least we can do to protect the most vulnerable among us during this time. And if we wish to be able to move freely throughout the community, we need to take the responsibility to protect our neighbors. Thank you for your efforts to provide a solution that achieves both. Stephen Ball of 22 Plantation Park Drive. As a small business owner in the town of Bluffton, the great frame up, my employees are required to work but do not want to wait on people who do not wear masks. As long as the town does not require masks and the big box stores do not require masks, then I cannot require them. The resolution means nothing without teeth. I applaud you for stepping out and addressing the mask issue, but do not bother if you don't require the use in public buildings and retail establishments. Next, we've got Mike Raymond, 5827 Ginkgo Lane. Honorable Mayor and council members, Beaufort County has had 11 deaths attributed to COVID-19, which for the 190,000 residents equates to a risk that is nearly unmeasurable. Nonetheless, the public and local businesses have demonstrated their understanding of and practice safety measures diligently. At this point, any town resolution to shape or reinforce behavioral policies will be redundant and send a confusing message, since it will conflict with the state mandates that are winding down and federal guidelines that are about to expire. Thank you. The next comment is from Valley Bubak, 470 Lake Bluff Drive in Bluffton. Dear Town of Bluffton elected leaders and officials, remember how Dr. Fauci and Birx said masks could be unhelpful? It was because people who aren't trained medical workers will touch their mask and their face and then other surfaces, thereby spreading the virus more broadly than if they had not been wearing a mask. The masks also make it harder to breathe and get fresh air. I am concerned that we will have a false sense of security with them and people will put themselves at greater risk. I wouldn't include masks in the recommendations from the town because of the risks with wearing one. I also would let businesses decide what to do since they are the ones assuming the risks and legal liability. If the town mandates certain guidelines, then it is assuming responsibility if those guidelines turn out to be problematic. Ultimately, taxpayers and citizens should ultimately bear the responsibility for lawsuits against the town. Please open up and let the public and the business owners make their own decisions. Next, we have Carol Weir of Bluffton. Thank you for considering a recommendation that Bluffton residents wear masks when entering local businesses and that employees of businesses serving the public can also wear them. While the effectiveness of masks is an ongoing debate, wearing one signifies that the wearer is taking the threat of COVID-19 seriously and practicing social distancing. They are visual reminders that we should all be careful now. The bottom line is that the healthcare experts have asked us to do this, and we should support our officials and healthcare workers by doing what they ask us to do. Masks say, I care about the health of others. If we all wear them in public indoor spaces, we are saying to each other, I care about protecting you, and I can see that you care about protecting me. And the last one is from Linda Sampagna, 16 Cantor Circle in Bluffton. I think it's imperative that the council vote in favor of the mask ordinance. Today, a report was published in the Island Packet stating South Carolina was one of the worst places in the country and one of the only 7 states to get an F rating for social distancing. Those of us who wear masks and are responsible will not continue to shop or do business in stores where masks are not required. It is up to you, members of the council, to protect the citizens of Bluffton. It's not political, it's public safety.
Is that all, Kim?
That's it.
Okay, public comment is over. One thing we don't have on here, and I'll ask, should we have an adoption of the agenda? Terry? Okay, if we can jump in before formal items and approve this agenda from formal items down, unless there's a change. If not, is there a motion to approve the agenda, item 5, 6, 7, and 8? Anybody want a thumbs up? Anybody want to approve the agenda? Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Let's just do a loud vote. I'll do ayes and against. All those in favor state by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, so we have one's a formal item. Consideration of an emergency resolution of the town of Bluffton in furtherance of the health, public safety, and welfare of the town of Bluffton to urge businesses and citizens to maintain necessary and proper protective procedures for the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of the town of Bluffton. And Scott, before you start, just maybe something I noticed on social media yesterday. Yeah, real quick, Larry. We are not responding to comments made on social media, only the public comments that were sent in. So please don't think we're overlooking you, but we are not on Facebook now. We're here running a very formal meeting, and if you have issues, please public message us, email us. If any of us want to get on social media afterwards and reply, we can. So I just don't want people to think we're overlooking them. Larry, did you have something?
Yes, Mayor, if I could, I'd like to ask our Terry, our attorney, a legal question before we get started pertaining to me recusing myself. Are you there,
Go ahead,
Terry?
Mr. Toomer.
Yes, sir. I
Yes,
guess
I
you
am. Go right ahead.
it was in the paper this morning in the opinions, letters to the editor or whatever, where there is at least one person who thinks that I should recuse myself from voting on anything to do with this resolution because my wife and I own retail businesses. And anyway, I just want to find out if I need to. I'm more than willing to, but I want your advice as to whether I should. And what do you think about it?
Councilman Toomer, of course, the recusal decision is yours and yours alone to make. The South Carolina law that applies in this situation states that if a council member or a member of their family has an economic interest in something that is brought before council, that council member should recuse themselves. An economic interest is an interest different than what the general public would have. Economic interest means an interest distinct from the general public in the purchase, sale, lease, contract, option, or other transaction that might have some type of monetary benefit to that family member or to the council member. Most time recusals are involved with the purchase and sale of property and ordinances that might be involved in that. In this situation, council is being asked to look at a resolution as opposed to an ordinance. I do not think the law mandates you to recuse yourself because your businesses have no different economic interest than all other businesses in the town. And the interest would be no different than the general public. Whether you desire to recuse yourself or not is purely your decision. I do not believe under the law as it is now written in South Carolina and how it has been interpreted by both the Attorney General and the Ethics Committee or Commission. I do not believe it is a requirement that you recuse yourself, but again, it is up to you. And the resolution that is before council tonight, again, is not an ordinance, and there is nothing in this that specifically mandates any behavior or punishes anyone if they do not follow it. I don't know, did I answer the question well enough for you, Council Toomer?
Yeah, well, that's pretty much the way that I see it and read it and have come to obey it. So I think at this time, I don't want to recuse myself if I don't need to legally. So thank you for your answer, and I'll just roll the dice and go ahead and be a part of this meeting.
Right. One thing, Larry, I mean, I have a business. I'm a small business owner. I think Bridget's a small business owner. Terry, I mean, we're
Right.
Fred is a small business, works for a small business. So it kind of puts us out of business. If
we-
resolution.
There's no mandatory action taking place here.
Right. That's what I was. Yeah. And even if it was, I don't know.
And I think we're going to discuss recusals and things in Robert's rules. I don't know if it's a Jeopardy question, but I think deeper in, and I think a lot of that's education to public about things like this. So, but I'm glad you asked, Larry. Thank you for clarifying that with our attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr.
Okay.
Rupert.
Sure. Okay, so if Scott can do the presentation, guys, if we can all mute, because there, even if you shuffle a paper, it really does make noise on us, and I'm sure online. So if we can all mute, and Scott, please do it. And then I'm going to ask questions of each of all like before. So if you could, when I call on you, ask your questions, and then we can decide and move on. So mute, please.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. As you recall, on Tuesday evening, there were some concerns that were expressed over the ordinance that we were considering, or that you were considering, and the concerns centered over the punitive aspects of the ordinance and the mandates that were contained within it. The takeaway was that although that ordinance did not receive a motion, the council wanted to do something, and there were some good ideas and good nuggets and just good practices that were contained in that ordinance. So the alternative is that we have brought you forward tonight for your consideration, a resolution. This resolution is simply a reinforcement of the governor's directions that he provided in Executive Order 2020-28. And it also contains some helpful recommendations and a best practices guide on how to best carry out those mandates that the governor specified. Specifically, there are 3 articles to this resolution. The first one encourages citizens and urges citizens to wear protective face masks. The second article advises that it will enforce all the executive orders that the governor has issued during this COVID-19 pandemic, to include Executive Order 2020-28, which contain special provisions for maximum occupancy rates in retail establishments, social distancing practices, and sanitation requirements. And the third and final article is simply a reference to a best practices guide that provides a greater level of detail and specificity with regard to how to carry out social distancing, how to manage emergency maximum occupancy rates in your stores, and how to maintain sanitation requirements and to monitor your employees for any signs of COVID, et cetera. So that's what we brought forward for you tonight. The attachment to the resolution is the best practices guide. Should you adopt this resolution this evening, we will distribute this best practices guide. We have an email group set up for all of our business license holders within the town of Bluffton, and we can easily get this best practices guide to them so they can have it for reference to best protect their employees and their patrons. That's really the extent of what I have to formally present to you on this, but I'm more than willing to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. I'll go through and I'll just be last unless nobody has questions, and I'll go first. But Dan, I'm gonna go down as we sit on council. Dan, any thoughts of this or changes or comments on this now resolution? Unmute, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to remind everybody that public, that this is a resolution. It's there's a big difference between a resolution and an ordinance, and it's not mandated, as I said earlier. And I think the message that council is trying to get out is we're concerned. We're concerned about our citizens, our public, and you know, for me personally, wearing a mask is not about me, whether I want to wear the mask or not. It's about my wife, my children, my family, my parents, you, friends. You know, that's why the encouragement is coming about continuing the social distancing with a mask. And I want to say also that let us not forget, when you read the totals that are put out by the governor's office about the number of infections in the state of South Carolina, our own DHEC says you should multiply that number by at least 9. That's the minimum. And so, you know, 6,995 as of today times 9 is 54,855. So there's a lot more infection out there than most of us are aware of. So anyway, I'm glad we're doing the best practices, and that's really all I have.
Great. and no comments or changes right now to the way it's written. Are you okay with it? For
I am,
Scott?
Mayor.
Great. Okay, next is Fred. You're sitting right next to Dan, so you're up. Anything on the resolution?
And it's not sitting next to me. I'm home.
Well, you're sitting next to him virtually when you're at town council, so pretend.
I echo Dan's thoughts and sentiments. I believe being proactive in our leadership and means that we care about our citizens, and not only we care about our citizens, we want to show that having a sense of forward thinking is important to help guide the process. Many of us, like Dan said, doesn't have all the true data, or are not trying to learn as much as they elected us to learn about what's truly going on in the medical field. And my eyes are glued to the television. My eyes are glued to data, because as a leader of my community, I want to make sure not only that I encourage them, but that I also use the same type of examples, set the example as well. And I think we all realize that this is something that we can't even figure out ourselves. The medical professionals are still trying to figure it out. So let's not take this disease and this pandemic as if it's something that we think is going to go away tomorrow, because it's not. And so if we take these precautions, maybe we can help alleviate or shorten the length of time that we can get back to being normal. So I don't see any problem with this resolution. I support it. I wish we could do more, and I wish that most of our citizens hear that my concern is love and is not big government. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Fred. Larry, comments on the resolution? Is it look all right? Any changes, any thoughts? You're up. Unmute, Larry.
Thank you. Mainly, I just want to make sure that our public understands the difference in a resolution and an ordinance, which I think most everybody does by now, but I'm sure there's some that I've been hearing from that didn't get it, just the difference. And I just want to make sure that it's clear to them that a resolution is a suggestion or urging people to follow these guidelines. It doesn't mean that someone's going to get a ticket. It doesn't mean that somebody's going to jail or somebody's going to get grabbed by the police because they don't have a mask on at some point, or any of that. I think most of the complaints were civil rights type, just constitutional rights where people don't want to be made to do things or have to if they don't want to. Hopefully everybody wants to do everything they possibly can. I know I do. We do. We're 100% behind public health safety. We practice it all the time. So I'm fine with it the way it is. It's it should at least bring out some knowledge to people that may not realize that there are a lot of things that they could be doing to just be a little safer. So I don't see anything that I would like to change. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Larry. Bridget? Mute.
Yeah, I don't see any changes that need to be made to the resolution. I agree with it as it's written. Just wanted to state to the public, like I understand people have frustrations and concerns over what's going on, and want to ensure everyone that public safety is definitely our #1 focus. I know in looking at the resolution and not trying to mandate things. I know with the consensus between the majority of us, particularly I know me, never wanted us to have anything that was mandated because we don't need to add any more chaos to, an already uncertain or chaotic situation when it comes to, do our officers now have to enforce something? If we're making citizens wear masks, are we going to be giving citations to citizens who don't follow that? So I like the line that we're going in and urging and recommending that, knowing that anyone who's not able to follow something if it were mandated wouldn't be punished by that. And just want to ensure everyone that we're doing everything in our power to, try to accommodate and keep everyone abreast of what's going on as best we can.
Thank you, Bridget. And honest, fine, I'll just chime in. Let's all do realize though, Article 2 relays the executive order of the governor of our state, and that is enforceable. So
Right.
this is a resolution, but enforcing the order of our governor in Article 2, which we've been doing. I had things to say, and I don't remember what it was. Great resolution. I think we all would have probably figured this out last week, but I think it was too much to scratch through and change. It is important for our customers, and that's everyone's customers, to have trust and faith they can walk into a business and they're going to be taken care of. And I think that's a goal into us getting back to normal. I am going to shout out to several restaurants that I've been to, and I'm going to, Larry, I promise you don't know I'm going to say this because I didn't tell you I was. I did get a message from Tina. Tina's a wife, but Tina's also a restaurant owner, and Larry's an oyster man. They just happen to be married to each other. She has gone out to do some sanitizing stations. I think she listened to us. She didn't like the fine of it. But the processes she's putting in place, like so many other restaurants and establishments are really going to give some trust into their clients and their customers. Greater Bluffton Chamber, I'll throw it out at y'all. I asked them if we went down this route, would they consider posting a template of the best practices? They can add their logo, they can put our logo on it. I told y'all Tuesday, I'm committed. I will pay for 500 copies of this myself to print out. And we can also put it as a template for businesses to print out, and they were excited. So I think both our chambers should jump on with this, provide the template for them to print out on their own. And if not, we'll have some printed. So anyway, that's really all I had to say on it all, I think. Anyway, anything else? If not, we'll move on to the motion. Is there a motion to approve the emergency resolution of the town of Bluffton, South Carolina, in furtherance of the health, public safety, and welfare of the town of Bluffton, South Carolina, to urge businesses and citizens to maintain necessary and proper protective measures for the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of the town of Bluffton?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Great. Any discussion? Please understand, health, safety, and welfare really does sum up what towns should do for their residents. Health, safety, and welfare, and we said it twice in this, so that's our guide. Anybody else? I'll do roll call. All in favor, and I'll go through. Dan?
Aye.
Fred?
Aye.
Larry?
Aye.
Bridget?
Aye.
Lisa? Aye. That's unanimous. Thank you. Okay. Moving on to exciting works. Don't leave, everybody, because this is going to be a very interesting way to discuss Robert's Rules of Order. So don't hang up on us if you're watching on Zoom or Facebook. Terry Finger or Richardson, who's up?
Mayor, thank you for letting Richardson and I examine and present this very exciting topic. I did learn something very interesting today. I didn't know. I'll let Richardson, he may lead off with who this Roberts guy was, where he lived, and all that kind of stuff. we were sitting at lunchtime today trying to figure out how to take a very dry and complex set of rules and turn them into something that may have at least a little bit of interest. And I jokingly said to my partner, Richardson LaBruce, I said, maybe we should do a Jeopardy game. And about 2 hours later, he had a draft of one. So we're gonna have a little Jeopardy tonight. Hopefully we'll learn a little bit about it. I know I'll learn a little bit more. I already learned about Mr. Roberts today, which was interesting. So I'm gonna kick it to Richardson and let him start. I think Richardson is gonna be Alex Trebek tonight. And Kim, you're in charge of the clock, okay? Go ahead, Richardson.
Thank you, Terry, and thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. I'm going to try to share my screen here, and let's make sure that, let's see if this works. Did that pop up? Let's see. Let's see.
Okay.
Share screen one more
You
time.
did share it a minute ago.
All right. Can y'all, do y'all see a presentation on there?
Yes.
Perfect. Bear with me for just a moment. Okay. This is my first time trying to do the share screen on Zoom, and I applaud town staff who has gotten proficient at all this. It is quite a lot to try to manage and handle at the same time. So it's impressive. But as Terry mentioned, we're going to be discussing parliamentary procedure, in particular, Robert's Rules of Order. The general outline is as follows. We're going to discuss the standard agenda items, those items that you see on your agenda from month to month, why they're important, what needs to be done, how we adopt them. We're also going to discuss motions, how they're made, what the different category of motions are, and how they, what their hierarchy is between each type of motion. And finally, we're going to give a little bit of an opportunity for some questions. As Terry mentioned, we're going to jump right in with some Jeopardy here. Councilman Wood, you are the person I can see on my screen, so I'm going to start with you to pick a category and a dollar amount.
I'll second that emotion for 200.
Absolutely. And for those of y'all not familiar with the rules of Jeopardy, let's see. There we go. All of these answers will have an E in them.
Can you hear me, Richardson?
I can. There we go.
Hey, wait.
I want to.
Richardson, do we all ring in to answer, or does only Dan answer?
Let's keep it interesting. Let's let everybody can ring in to answer.
Okay.
So this privileged motion offers a temporary break in the meeting. While there is a second required, it is not debatable.
Temporary break in the meeting.
A temporary break, and it does have an
Like
E.
a reset.
I think I heard the correct answer somewhere.
Did he ask it in a question?
What is the recess?
Recess.
That is correct. Is what is a motion for a recess?
Okay.
All right.
Debbie, I said it.
Terry will get you your prize shortly. So your standard agenda items, the first thing that you're typically going to have on your agenda is a call to order. As you all know, the meeting should be called to order by the mayor or the mayor pro tem or whoever is presiding over that meeting. So if it's a HPC meeting or a BZA meeting, it'll be the chair. We encourage all of our public bodies to start promptly at the appointed time. That's for the benefit of the members, but also the benefit of the public. And it's showing that you value the people's time. Roll call is an optional procedure, but it does help establish quorum. especially when we have virtual meetings.
So Richardson, instead of saying everyone's present and accounted for, should Kim or I guess Kim call roll?
I think it's really a matter of preference, I think, how y'all decide you want to do it. Roll call is included in Robert's rules, but it's not one of those mandatory requirements. So I really leave that to y'all's preference.
Mayor, this is Terry. There's no problem with the way that you have been opening, saying all present and accounted for. Kim and her minutes reflects who's there. So it's not an issue we need to worry about at all.
The next item that you typically have, and as y'all saw today, the adoption of the agenda. So why should a public body adopt an agenda? First and foremost, it serves as your guide for the business that's going to be conducted at the meeting. Once adopted, it also limits the introduction of new matters and new material. Under Robert's rules, and it's going to be a little different for a public body, but we're focusing on Robert's rules today. Under Robert's rules, if there isn't an adopted agenda, extraneous matters can be brought up at the meeting. The meeting is kind of a free-for-all. So that's why there's that strong encouragement. The reason that y'all always have an agenda and it's prepared well in advance is because of the South Carolina Code, which requires this advanced posting of an agenda. The law requires, I believe, 24 hours advance notice on posting the agenda. And again, y'all get that out usually well in advance. So how does a public body adopt an agenda? Almost all motions are going to follow the same procedure. As y'all are familiar with, it's a motion, a second, debate, and then vote. All right, Councilman Toomer, you are up. You can pick any Jeopardy question except I second that a motion for $200.
I second that emotion for 600.
Big money. Let's do it. To halt consideration of a motion immediately, the majority may lay the question on this common household object.
On
Table.
table.
I said it. I was
What
muted.
is the table? What is
What
the
is the
table?
table?
I think I heard Mayor Silica come up with the correct word first, but I believe it was Councilman Toomer who phrased it in a question.
Darn it.
Councilman
Larry.
Toomer, you can expect your prize from Terry in the mail shortly as well.
I muted it. I was
Thank you.
yelling it, but I was muted. Darn it.
So amending the agenda. This is an important item that we have to deal with on a pretty regular basis because of issues that come up at the last minute. This very small type is the code section from the South Carolina Freedom of Information Act, which would really govern your procedures for amending the agenda. So if you're going to add an item to the agenda for discussion, but there's not going to be a vote on it, there's going to be no formal action. What is the process? You have to have the approval of 2/3 of the members present. But if you're going to add an item to the agenda for final vote, or if there's going to be no opportunity for public comment on this matter, it's a little bit more complicated. You need 2/3 of the members present to vote in favor of the motion to amend, and you need a finding that an emergency or exigent circumstance exists. So if you have, for example, if you're going to amend to include a resolution that would authorize the acquisition of real property, you need 2/3 of the members present to vote to amend the agenda. And you need a finding that if you don't acquire this property, or you don't consider this motion or the resolution within this 24-hour period, there's an emergency or exigent circumstance.
And Richardson, the time to do that would be when the mayor is asking about adopting the agenda.
It is. So you can, that would be the preferred time is after the second when you have debate on that. But at any time during the meeting, you can amend the agenda. So if something happens to come up that y'all think you need to address immediately, just because you've adopted the agenda doesn't preclude you from amending after that.
Richardson, what's the wording for 2/3 of the members present? If you have a quorum, wouldn't you have to have 2/3 anyway?
So I think that's the idea. I think if you have, it's drafted so you could have a public body that has 5, 7, 9, however many people. But if you have, say,
Can't have a meeting without a
council of 5, you've got, yes, sir. So you've got a council of 5, and you have two people who have to recuse themselves. Then
Right.
you've got 3 voting members. As long as you get 2 of those 3 voting members to vote in favor of it, you have 2/3 of the members present and voting.
Oh, okay.
Let's see. Trying to move it. Let's try to move this along here. There we go. Standard agenda items, adoption of minutes. Is council required to keep minutes? Yes. And that is set by South Carolina code as well. All public bodies shall keep written minutes of their public meetings. The requirements for the meetings are set forth in the code and what's all included. Typically, the town clerk will maintain the minutes, and Kim does an excellent job of that. And they are provided to y'all typically well in advance. And we'll discuss a little bit about a motion to adopt the minutes. Under Robert's rules, there is no motion to adopt minutes. Minutes are considered adopted typically when they're read into the meeting. Under Robert's rules, the chair would simply say, are there any corrections to the minutes, which are then typically adopted on consent? I personally prefer the way that most public bodies handle it, where you get the minutes as part of the agenda in advance, and there's a consistency to that current approach where you actually do move to adopt. Robert's rules also says that there is nothing wrong with that procedure. So if anybody ever brings that up, we just wanted to make sure that y'all were aware of it. All right, Councilwoman Frazier. You have anything but I second that emotion for 2 or 6.
All right, let's do Henry M. Robert III for 200.
Henry M. Robert III. His father was the first president of this historically Black men's college located in Atlanta, Georgia, where there is a dormitory on campus named for him.
What is Morehouse College or Morehouse University?
That is correct.
You go.
All right, so Terry, I need my prize mailed to me also.
I will.
Are we keeping count of the dollars we're winning? Do we get that?
No, there's no dollars. This is random gifts, no dollars.
Okay. So 1 for every right answer. So right now we have 1 Bridget, 2 Dan, 1 Larry, or 2 Larry, 1 Dan?
1, I think 2 Larry, 1 Dan, or 2 Larry, 1 Bridget.
2 Larry. I thought Dan answered. Okay, go.
Dan got 1 too. First.
Okay,
Mine
then
was
we have 1 Dan, 1 Larry, 1
Brad,
Bridget.
Come on.
But
All
mine was
right.
600.
Executive session. So y'all are very familiar with the rules on executive session, but just again for the public and for everybody's edification, we just want to go over this one more time. A motion to enter executive session must include a reference to the specific purpose for executive session. That's required by the South Carolina Code. We have a South Carolina Supreme Court case from 2015 involving the city of North Augusta that sort of established what won't work, what isn't going to satisfy that specific purpose standard, but it didn't really provide a tremendous amount of context into what does satisfy it. But what we do know is that it has to be more than just a mere statement that we're going to go into executive session to discuss contractual matters, or that we are going to go into executive session for legal matters. So what we recommend again is that the motion include the particular code section that's referenced and the language used in the agenda, because I know that both Kim, Mark, and Terry work on making sure that that agenda language has what y'all need to satisfy what we believe is the current bar. Executive session motions are considered a privilege motion under Robert's rules, which generally would mean that it does not allow for debate. So what you'll see is a motion and then a required second and then the vote. You also have the unscheduled executive session. So you have that scheduled executive session portion on your agenda, but if you have a legal matter that arises during your meeting, perhaps as to a contract, you have a question about it, or as to the enforceability of an ordinance that you think you need legal advice, at that point, even if there's a motion pending, you can request that we go into executive session or move to go into executive session. There is a little portion on your agenda that tells the public that there can be executive session, that the council can move in to go into executive session at any point to discuss a pending item. So these are just some more standard agenda items, miscellaneous.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
I believe South Carolina statute lays out the criteria for executive session, such as contracts, land purchases, employee issues. Isn't that correct?
Yes, sir.
So it cannot just be anything we want. It's actually covered by about 3 or 4 items.
Absolutely, and thank you for pointing that out. Y'all are very limited in what you can go into executive session for. It's to discuss potentially legal matters relating to a pending or threatened claim, the acquisition of real property or the sale of real property. It's really those contractual negotiations that you prefer, that the public body would benefit from not having as part of the public record, because the potential purchaser or the potential seller would have an idea of what your bottom line figure may be, or what your negotiation, what really are your strong points of your negotiation. So things like that. But they're outlined in the South Carolina Code, and you're not allowed to deviate from those while in executive session. So the standard agenda items, just miscellaneous ones, we have the announcements, consent agenda, unfinished business, new business, pardon me, public comments, and adjournment. The one that I kind of like to focus on is adjournment, because it's a little bit of a strange motion. It requires a motion and second vote, but without debate, and it takes precedence over any pending motions. So it's one of those that at any point, a motion to adjourn can be made, whether there's other items pending. And it is also very common to hear a motion to adjourn being made by the chair when everything on the agenda is completed. So all of the items on the agenda are completed. There's nothing left. You often hear the chair say, "We are now adjourned," and bang the gavel once. That is permitted under some rules of procedure.
But
Out of
Kim,
care.
I got a question. Sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
I've seen on some council meetings, they just take a someone makes a motion to have a 5-minute recess. How does that fit in and what is that? Does that need a second and debate or?
It does. So I do actually address motions to recess coming up, but it's very similar to the adjournment. It's a privileged motion. It is a motion and a second. There's a vote, but there's no debate.
Okay.
And so that can be brought up at any point because the motion to recess is oftentimes needed and necessary for people to get a break, get some water, use the restroom. And what you don't want to do is have someone who needs to step out for a bit, have to leave and not have the ability to debate or be involved in the debate.
Okay. If you're going to do it later, I've got questions on it, but I'll wait.
Cool. Mayor Solka, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to jump to you. We have all of parliamentary procedure available, and we have Henry M. Robert, 200, 600, and I believe I second that a motion for 4.
I guess I need to unmute me. I had to tell myself that. Parliamentary procedure for 600.
In the event of a tie vote, this happens.
What is the vote fails?
That is correct. So this one actually gets brought up quite a bit in most assemblies. If you have a board of an even number of people because of a recusal or because of an absence, and there is a tie vote, there's no majority, and the motion fails for lack of a majority.
Lisa, your gift is in the mail.
I just want a point. That's all. I'm happy.
You're on the board.
So yeah, there are, jumping into motions, there are five classes of motions. And motions are really nothing more than a formal procedure for taking action by a body. Individually, most council members or committee members can't take action on their own. You have to act as a body. So this motion is the way to kind of codify that, or not, pardon me, not codify, but to memorialize the decision-making and the direction of the board. Most motions require a second, but not all do. And most motions can be adopted by a majority vote, but some require 2/3 of the membership. So the motions that y'all mostly deal with are called main motions. They introduce the subject and they're substantive. So they empower y'all with the ability to act. Those are the ones where I move that council approve, I move that council adopt, I move that we deny, something along those lines. Your second type of motion is a subsidiary motion. Those are designed to assist members with handling a main motion. That's where you have your motions to amend, your motion to lay on the table, and your motion to refer to a committee. Privilege motions, those deal with the rights of the members of the group and not the subject matter. Those are the ones that take precedence over any other motion. So the motion to recess, the motion to adjourn, the motion to enter into executive session. They don't have to deal necessarily exactly with what you're going to discuss, but rather it has to do with making sure that the members have the information that they need or they're in a position to make the best decision that they can. Incidental motions, they are, I would say, other than using the word incidental, they are somewhat related to the business that y'all are discussing. So if the chair makes a ruling as to, say, a point of order, then a motion to appeal that decision is an incidental motion. A point of order is an incidental motion, and a point of order is when you're questioning whether the procedure is proper. Finally, you have motions to bring before the assembly. These are relatively rare, but they are permitted for public bodies in South Carolina by the Supreme Court. These are intended to reopen matters after they've already been decided. You have a motion to reconsider, a motion to rescind, and the motion to amend something previously adopted. So for the main motions, only
Hey,
one main
Rich-
motion can be.
Richardson, excuse me
Yes,
one
sir.
second. Go back to that last piece. So as a body, mayor calls for a motion or, asks for a motion, it's voted, it's second, it's discussion, and then it's voted on favorably. You're saying somebody can come back somewhere afterwards and bring that motion, question that motion?
They can. So there are some limitations to those rules. But for example, and I'm just picking I'm trying to pick a hypothetical, and this isn't based off of anything that's been before y'all or any other body, but you have a master plan that's brought before you in May. You review it, everything looks fine, and y'all approve it. A week after y'all approve this master plan, new evidence comes to light that some of the information that they provided to you was either not accurate or fraudulent, or they made material misrepresentations to the board. At that point, someone who voted in favor of approving the master plan can bring a motion to rescind or even a motion to reconsider that, or perhaps the motion to amend something that was previously adopted. So you can actually rescind the approvals that you have been granted. And that is, the South Carolina Supreme Court has recognized that right.
But you have to be the one, it's the person who made the motion that has to come back and do it, right? Not just somebody random. That's what I was always.
It has to be someone who voted for the prevailing side. So if you have a contentious issue that's 3-2, and say Councilman Wood, you're on the losing side, you're part of the 2, you can't make the motion to reopen. But if Mayor Silica was on the prevailing side and she was part of the 3, and she thinks that it needs to be reconsidered, she can make that motion to reconsider.
Gotcha. Good. Keep going.
So main motions, only one main motion can be pending at a time. Main motions cannot be introduced if there's another main motion pending. A privilege motion is pending, which is your motions to recess, motion to adjourn. An incidental motion is pending, and that's your motion to go into executive session, or a motion to bring a matter before the assembly is still pending. What is the difference between a resolution and a main motion? They both accomplish the same thing. A resolution is generally a written main motion that is provided in advance. It's used typically when the subject matter of the motion is going to be relatively complicated, and it benefits the public body and it benefits the public to have that subject matter and what's being decided distilled into writing, so that the motion that's being stated by council isn't paragraph after paragraph after paragraph. There are certain things under South Carolina law that require it be a resolution, such as the purchase of property. But written main motions, like resolutions, are really important for clarity. They're important for legal reasons, and they also help staff in preparing the minutes. All right, Councilman Hamilton, I think it's your turn.
Parliamentary procedure for 600.
Oh, I think that one's been decided. Or that, I guess that one's already been answered.
Yeah, so I get a prize anyway.
Yeah, answer it and get another point.
I won that one. You can have my prize.
I think we have parliamentary procedure for 400 left. I think 200, and then Henry M. Robert for 400 and 600.
Henry M. Roberts III for 600.
As a military engineer, he constructed fortifications on San Juan Island during this bloodless 1859 conflict.
Fred Hamilton. Who is Fred Hamilton? I have no idea.
I'm horrible at history.
So, and this was also a poorly worded answer, but the answer is, what is the Pig War? The only death involved was a single pig.
He was called the Pig War. You wrote it wrong.
I did. So the
blah blah blah.
I think maybe I read it a little bit wrong. So as a military engineer, he constructed fortifications on San Juan Island during this bloodless 1859 conflict.
There you go.
So my Alex Trebek is lacking.
Well, he's on right now, so on so we can see who wins.
So subsidiary motions are another class of motion. They will typically have those characteristics that are set forth on your PowerPoint, but to summarize, they're applied to another motion while it's pending. They're designed to help council dispose of these motions. They do something to a motion that's already in existence, and they can be applied to any main motion. If there's a higher ranking motion, such as a motion for a recess pending, you can't have a subsidiary motion heard. Again, your most common uses are the motion to table, your motion to amend, and your motion to postpone. There are a couple of different types of motions to table and motions to amend and motions to postpone. You can motion to postpone to an indefinite time. You can do it to a time certain. Similarly, with the motion to table, you can say, we want to table this until our next meeting, or you can use just the motion to table, which theoretically under Robert's rules allows it to stay on that table until there's a motion made to pull it off the table, or the agenda is written to pull it off the table. These types of motions almost always require a second. They are debatable and can be adopted by the majority. The only one that is not debatable that I can recall is the motion to lay on the table. So your privilege motions, these do not relate to your pending business, and there is such importance to what y'all are doing, the work that y'all are providing, that they can interrupt debate and can be considered pretty much immediately. There's a reason that we have that restroom ahead sign on this PowerPoint slide. It's because that's your motion to recess. If y'all have to go and step out for a moment, that's the best way to handle it. You can recess for however long y'all need. You can raise a question of privilege. So if you have questions about the procedure that's being done or the procedure that's being followed and whether it's the proper procedure, that's one of those privilege motions. All right, so we're going to cycle back through. I'm going to jump to you, Ms. Frazier. I think we have Henry M. Robert for 400, parliamentary procedure for 4, and maybe I second that emotion for 4.
Let's do Henry and Robert for 400.
That went to the wrong one. Let me try that again. I'm going to give me one moment here.
I bet she'll change her mind.
Well, this is my favorite question, so that's why I'm digging for it. Henry M. Robert III.
We really want to hear that.
I appreciate the excitement. So Henry M. Robert III for 400. Although raised in Ohio, this Jasper County, South Carolina town was Henry Roberts' birthplace.
Mm.
He was born just down the road.
What is Hardyville?
Where is Levy?
What is the embassy?
What is Robertville?
Robertville, darn it.
Oh, gosh.
So
That's
if y'all are,
sad.
if you are heading up 321 toward
Know
Columbia,
where it is.
right there, there's a little, there's a historic marker as well for it.
Yes, it is. Darn it.
So at the scoring is Lisa's -2. Who
That's
lost
right.
there? I think Larry lost one
Larry
there,
lost.
and I think Bridget lost one. So everybody's back to 0. We're keeping
No,
the gifts.
I didn't respond, but Larry, Lisa, and Dan did. They definitely.
Okay.
I'm at 0. I'm not -2. I've only got one right.
Wait a minute, I can't be at 0 because he read my question wrong.
Okay, you're at 5.
That's true. That's true.
Okay.
All right, move on.
Yep.
All
let's
right,
go.
incidental motions. So incidental motions, these are the characteristics are they usually relate to pending business. They deal more with the procedure than the substance. They take precedence over most main motions and are perhaps the least common that you'll see. Because of their dealing with procedure over substance, they don't usually require a second or debate. So you're going to hear those with a point of order, appealing decisions, requesting that a question or a motion be divided into separate matters, and requests and inquiries into the body. The reason we have that photo is obviously they're going to come up during more contentious meetings. Usually when you're seeing some, how do I say, some procedural posturing between two sides of a public body on a really tough issue, it's being done with incidental motions. All right, Councilman Wood, you're up.
Dan, you're up.
I'm waiting.
Oh, pick one.
Or they're all
Yeah.
available.
I think we have parliamentary procedure for 400, parliamentary
Right.
procedure for 200,
that.
and parliamentary
Parliamentary.
procedure for 4. While a point of privilege can be used to address non-material matters such as noise or room temperature, this point should be raised to object to procedure or a personal affront.
I don't know the answer to that.
Is it point of order?
That is correct. It is point of order. And you often hear those used interchangeably, but a point of privilege is something that really has nothing to do with the topic or the discussion, or even, again, the issues at hand. It's to try to get the attention of the chair so that you can address something that, again, will help you kind of be in a better position to make decisions. So again, noise or room temperature. Point of order deals directly with procedural questions. So the motions to bring before the assembly, again, we discussed these a little bit already. You have the motion to reconsider. That requests a new debate and reconsideration of a matter. Typically, these can't be made except at the very next meeting to follow after the next meeting that follows the meeting in which the matter was decided. So if you make a decision at a March meeting, usually absent some extraordinary circumstances, you can't do a motion to reconsider in September. Motion to amend something previously adopted. This is when you don't want a full reconsideration, but you want to amend something that had been adopted to incorporate, let's say, language that y'all had intended to include in there, but perhaps the way that the motion was worded didn't include it. The motion to rescind, that's something that is a motion to completely change the vote. So completely rescinding the vote. Those are given a little bit more freedom than the motion to reconsider. Those are the ones that you could see potentially being brought up at that September meeting where you had the certain decision in March. And again, the motion to take from the table, unless a matter is tabled to a specific date, you have to have a motion to take from the table or have it included on the agenda that's adopted. Depending on the type of motion, it may require a 2/3 of a vote. They always require a second, and they are almost always debatable.
Richardson, to take from the table something that was tabled, and we just almost went through this the other week, say it stays on the table, does it have to be formally put on an agenda, or do you just bring it up at the next meeting?
So this is where there's a little bit of conflict between, I would say, Robert's rules and South Carolina law. You're required to have anything that you may consider at that meeting on your agenda, unless there's those exigent circumstances where you have to amend your agenda at a later date. Robert's rules would say, no, you can put something on the table and just leave it there until you decide y'all want to bring it up again. But in this case, obviously you defer to South Carolina law. I would always, if you have something that you put on the table and you don't say it's going to be for this next meeting, always include it on the agenda if you can remember to do so. That removes the requirement that you move to take from the table, and it also makes sure that you're following the public notice requirements. So here's kind of a question that summarizes what we've talked about, and I could not figure out how to phrase it as a Jeopardy answer. But say John makes a motion to approve an application, Debra seconds, debate ensues. Jill makes motion to amend John's motion. Debra seconds again. Then another member of the board, Steve, demands a point of order from the chair, claiming Jill's motion to amend is out of order. There is no second. How should the chair address these motions?
The point of order first.
That's right. So absolutely, you handle the point of order first. Now, there is no second for the point of order, but that's not necessary because a point of order is a privileged motion that does not require a second. As a privileged motion, it's your highest priority, and you have to deal with that first. The second thing that you would have to deal with is the motion to amend. It has a second. It's a subsidiary motion, so it takes precedence over John's motion. So the chair should allow debate on the motion to amend, and she should start with Jill, because whoever makes the motion is entitled to speak first on it. After debate ends, the chair should call the vote on the motion to amend. If it passes, you restate the original motion to approve the application as amended. There is no need for a second, and a debate on amended motion may begin. So there are typically 2 steps in making a motion, and I've tried to break this down as much as possible, and it's a lot more information than is probably necessary. But the first thing that needs to happen is obviously the member makes the motion. And so you have to bring that motion before the assembly. There are three parts of doing that. First, you make that motion. I move that council do so and so. Then another member seconds the motion. Under Robert's rules, you can use I second or seconded. Even after there's a second, the chair can rule that there's a motion, that the motion's out of order. Finally, what's required is that the chair states the question to the public body. This actually puts the motion on the floor for consideration, debate, and is a triggering point that won't allow unilateral removal of it by the person who made the motion. So there's a lot of language that Robert's Rules recommends that be included when the chair states the question. Oftentimes with public bodies, those motions are so complex and so lengthy that it doesn't make sense to try to restate the question completely. But for standard things like resolutions or ordinances, the common language is it is moved and seconded that council approve the application with the conditions set forth by staff in the staff report provided, or it is moved and seconded to adopt resolution number so-and-so. Once that's stated, the chair usually says, is there any discussion? Once that triggering event occurs, then you have the consideration of the motion. There are certain rules on the debate. Once debate's finished, then you do the vote, you put the question to a vote. As we've seen tonight on the electronic meeting, the way that we're voting electronically is a little bit different than the way we would do it in regular session with everybody there, but all those in favor of the motion say aye, or here, like we're doing with a roll call vote. And then finally, the chair announces the result of the vote.
Richardson, can you go back to the beginning? I want to make sure I understand that the chair has to pose the question and no one else can just arbitrarily make a motion without being recognized by the chair, right?
So I think that's one of those, there are what Robert's rules state, and then there's what's practical and what's reasonable. The rules state that the chair needs to recognize the member before the member speaks in almost any context. But when you have a small group, like 5 people, there needs to be there should be a more free flow exchange of commentary, especially with a public body. So what we typically, or what I would recommend that we just really kind of focus on this is the member making the motion. That's the first thing. So if y'all have staff comes up, they explain the resolution that they're proposing. Scott gets done with his presentation, y'all ask him questions, and you decide, okay, I think we should adopt this resolution. You can make that motion. I move that council approve this, adopt resolution number so-and-so. It's really more how the chair handles the meeting. That's one of the things that Mayor Silica or Councilman Hamilton, as you as Mayor Pro Tem, you can kind of dictate what sort of deference to the chair is required prior to making that motion. But once you make that motion, all that's really required is the second, and then that third step. Once you have that second, it's important that the chair recognize that there's a motion and a second on the table, or excuse me, a motion and a second on the floor, and that y'all need to debate it. I hope that answered your question. I know it was a little bit of a convoluted answer.
Well, can I jump in? Because I think sometimes the motion's there and I read it for someone to say so moved. That's appropriate, but also, isn't it also appropriate for someone else to read the motion without
Absolutely.
me recognizing them?
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Are there any other questions about this slide? Because I know this is the one that is probably the slide that's probably of the most importance for y'all. Most of the other slides really, you're going to have Terry or I'll be there, or Mark or Kim, someone to help if you have questions about if it's a 2/3 vote or a second's required. But this is where, you know, y'all probably spend the most of your time. So if there are any other questions, I'd be happy to answer.
I have one. I was at a meeting last year when somebody said, I called the question.
So calling the question is a motion designed to somewhat limit debate. And we strongly recommend against them. They are permitted by Robert's rules. I'm going to my Robert's rules book right now.
And while you're looking it up, Richardson, we've done that before. It's just when it just goes on and on and on and on, and you kind of are circling back around. Someone on council could say, call the question, and then we end debate and vote. And we've done that in the past.
And I think it's appropriate, provided that every member has had their opportunity to speak.
Right.
Once every member has had that opportunity to speak, I think that calling the question is appropriate. The concern that you have is when the motion to call the question is being used or attempted to be used to avoid a debate.
When I experienced it, it was with a large body, a large board, you know, maybe 30 people, 35, 40 people. And so you have a lot of mayhem, and eventually that was thrown out there, and I'm glad that it was, frankly.
And that makes sense for the rules for Robert's rules are designed for assemblies of thousands down to assemblies of 3. And so it's important that, you know, that some of these motions, some of these procedures make sense and are much more convenient for large assemblies versus small assemblies. But you certainly have the right to call a question. And if it's improper or if it's not in the best interest of the public body, you have a majority that can vote against it.
And don't you need a second on that? Because I looked in the thing. I love what Kim sent us, by the way. That's a great online thing. Because I think they put in there like I moved in the question or something. But you have to have a second to do it, right? And then could the
So
chair say, let's have more discussion? The chair can still overrule that, or does that end it?
So there are I guess a couple of different ways that can be handled. So you can say, I call for the question, I move for the question, I move we vote now. If the chair hears that, she can call for a second. She can also request that she says, is there unanimous consent to ending debate? But when you're making a call to seek the ending of debate, you would typically require a second, and it would require a 2/3 vote.
That's what I thought. Okay.
And the 2/3 vote is really to avoid having one member who still wants to debate and everybody else wants to continue forward.
Richardson, what happens when we are in a discussion and someone just pop up and says, I move that we make this decision at that point while we're still in discussion?
Well, I think it's kind of similar to your calling the question.
Mm-hmm.
So anytime you're looking to end debate, a single member is trying to end this debate, you have to kind of jump through some substantial procedural hoops to be able to have the public body terminate debate over any one member's objection. So if somebody says, let's just vote now, I want to end debate. Yeah, I think the chair can treat that as a motion to call the question and request a second. If there's a second, she can put that question to the, she can put that question on the floor, bring it to the public body. There can be a debate, there can be a limited debate, I believe, on that one, if I recall correctly. And then it requires that 2/3 vote. I would, let me double check on whether you can debate a motion to call the question. But I think at the very least, I know you have to have a second and a 2/3 vote.
We'll get back to you on that one. Of course, if that motion, if the motion that Councilman Hamilton just mentioned was made, it would be my recommendation. I think it would be the mayor's natural inclination to say, please finish up what you're talking about, as opposed to cutting them off. I've never seen this body try to cut somebody off. I think the mayor would urge that person to finish up, and then perhaps you could call the question at that point in time. But the mayor could kind of control that.
And I pulled up the online thing Kim sent, and that little chart does say that can be debated. But again, I don't see us as a group having any disrespect with each other on it, but that's why we have these rules.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Are there any other
Wrapping-
questions?
Nope. Move on.
All right. So, Mayor Silica, I think it's your turn now.
What's left on the, I second that emotion.
I think we have 400.
400.
And remember, all of these answers are going to include the letter E. So this subsidiary motion is often used to fine tune a main motion to make it more acceptable to the majority.
What is amended?
That is correct. What is the motion to amend?
Back in the positive.
I think she won a trip on Carnival Cruise.
Well, it's on right now, which is usually when I eat. So I'm in Jeopardy mode. So let's finish before my husband goes to bed, because it's going to be soon.
And I think this is Terry. I think we've kind of talked about motions to amend. Does anybody have any questions about motions to amend, when they're appropriate, how they're done? All right, let's roll to the next one. Richardson.
I'm fine on motions. How about everybody else?
Yes.
Yeah, I think there are only 2 slides left. So
Okay, cool.
I see you all. You have 12 slides left, so you're killing me.
those are all the Jeopardy. Those are all the Jeopardy slides. They're at the end.
Move on
So
past
we're
the-
almost through with those.
I second that emotion from Terry.
All right. So the final question, I think it's here, parliamentary procedure. That's not it. Parliamentary procedure for $200. Traditionally, this many raps of the gavel are used to call the meeting to order. Hint, it's one less than used to tell people to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
This is a Mayor Silica question.
I am so sorry. I like checked out for a minute. Traditionally, okay, let me read it. I don't know. What do you think, Bridget? You're new. You know all these rules.
That hint throws me off. My guess would be 1.
The correct
No.
answer is
0. What is 0? No,
the
what is
correct
1?
answer. The correct answer is what is 2? There are 3 for standing for the Pledge of Allegiance, and then 1 to tell people to sit back down after the Pledge of Allegiance.
Oh.
I did not know that.
Wow.
All right, and if there are any questions, feel free to ask them now or ask us at any town council meeting.
I'll just let y'all jump in. Any questions of this? Is there something else you'd rather, like you'd like him to address maybe in an email or next council meeting or anything that you feel we didn't cover?
Just send us the PowerPoint.
Yeah, send us a
Absolutely.
PowerPoint. Okay, well, thank you. That was interesting and exciting at the same time.
Thank y'all for allowing us to do it.
Do we have any other questions? Y'all, thank you I'll just throw it out there. Thanks for doing this. We have 2 women in our town that are having birthdays this week. And if we have others, I think we should shout out. But with the 25 people left looking at us, Joni Hayward's birthday was yesterday and Mary Reeves' birthday is today. And they're 2 really strong women. I told you about Jenny Kitty. She's such a wonderful lady and really great people for our town. So happy birthday to them. Anything else for the good of everybody?
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. We have to have a first and a second. So is there a meeting to adjourn?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
How many hits? We're adjourned.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, I checked out on that one.
That's okay. I just did that. Thanks, Mark.
Perfect.